chance to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
They seem quite optimistic to me.
All right, I got a lot to talk about it today. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Ugh, how did they screw up the microphone? It was such a good conference. I just screwed up. But beyond the technical difficulties, this was an excellent conference. It's only talk, I know, but you still can see something from it, and you heard so many good things I got to cover here today. I'm going to enjoy it. It's a long road from getting in front of the microphone at the introduction to having success. I know that, but you've got to admit, listening to certain people and watching them tells you, at least in some ways, who they are, what's their direction, and what they're about. So I'm going to cover it here today without, hopefully, microphone difficulties. I have them all the time, so I shouldn't get down too much on the Dolphins here. But ultimately, this was a very coherent message. The people were personable. My man Jon-Eric Sullivan, he's smart. He seems to be pretty darn transparent, has character. You could see in the way he delivers things and what he talked about. And then Jeff Hafley, the same thing. These guys are simpatico at the surface level and presentation. This looks good. And even Stephen Ross, so I'll get into in a second, said a lot of the right stuff. I think he's serious this time. And I don't know, again, what this whole thing's going to amount to, but it does feel good. And not from a hopium level. You guys should know me for the years. I pick on stuff when I see that's wrong. This was pretty much, without the technical difficulties, as good as you're going to get at this early infantile stage. So that's the whole deal. I want to get into that. Opened up with the bad mic. I don't know how they did that, man. That's like ridiculous. What a waste. But you got to think of it this way. Maybe if you want to watch the tea leaves, that this technical stuff is really just the fermentation of something very good to come. I couldn't believe he dropped. Stephen Ross was very discombobulated in ways. He dropped his papers. He walked over, had this weird handshake with Hafley. I don't think it was he meant to do it. He just looked discombobulated. I think he understood the gravity of the situation, and maybe he probably could hear the microphone too cutting out, and that flustered him. But then he moved out of the way quickly, and then Jon-Eric, my man Jon-Eric Sullivan got up there, did his talk. It wasn't long. He hit a lot of good points. Then the two of them, and then Hafley spoke, and then they both sat down together. But there's a lot of good stuff, guys, and there's things that I've been trying to say over the years, actual quotes that I've said. Not because I invented them, but they were football truisms. And I've argued with people. I've argued with some content providers. Well, this stuff that was being said by me, by everybody generally in football, and now with these guys, this is great news. It really makes me believe that at the very basic concept, we have guys who know the game and are going to do the right thing from the philosophical standpoint. So you could see both these guys got passion. I loved how they got emotional over their families. That's kind of expected, but there's people who don't. And football is family. It's part of the beauty of the game. I miss the most having teammates. I miss the most going into a game and fighting through something without somebody next to me. And if you don't love your family, you're probably not going to have a deep love for your players and staff. And so both these guys are very, very similar in how they do business. Both smart, both have a toughness of personality. I talked about, some people made fun of me looking at the camera. If you see a guy and he's talking like this, there's something wrong there. You're supposed to look at somebody, not eyeball them, but you're supposed to look at somebody when you talk to them and be genuine. I mean, there's certain football speech that's always tied to it. But you've got to see genuineness shine through, and both were like that. I liked how Sullivan's father was I didn't know he was a 30-year coach in the NFL. This guy has been marinated in the game. You could see how he feels about the game, his core understandings. And when your father's in the NFL for that long, you've been brought up in that understanding. It's a great, great thing. He talked about draft, build, retain your own. Not they've earned free agency. Let's trade up 70 picks for a guy. Let's go get old wounded free agents. And yeah, that was retarded, but how many people told you Greer's got a new way of building a team? Not me. This guy understands the core of the game, and that's the Packers' philosophy. Build through the draft and keep the right guys of your own. This is great news. He talked about a healthy cap. There's no cap. There's no just whatever you want. No, it's not. And one thing I liked him talking about, he said, we'll go for free agency when the cap gets healthy. And I said probably 28 going into 28 offseason, going into 28 seasons, probably when you want to go get that prime free agent. Don't want to do it this year. Likely can't. Maybe not next year unless you get something that's spectacular. But you got to get this cap right. I spent a lot of time on a podcast from 2 days ago to talk about that. This thing needs to be gutted underneath, all the dead wood ripped out in year one to get the cap healthy, because there's going to be so much dead spread out over 2 years, whether you get rid of two or not, that you've got to get this cap healthy, because that is how you build your team. And then I did a podcast today, earlier this morning, talked about I don't want Malik because I don't want to ruin our chance at a good draft pick for short-term gains. And some people are like, well, and I understand what they're saying, but maybe they didn't get what I was saying. It's not about tanking. You want your staff and players to give everything they have. But if you don't have the horses, you aren't doing anything. And so what do? Bring in short-term stuff to help you short-term, but it's going to hurt you long-term. If you do this thing the right way, cut everything out that's dead wood that won't be here to help you. Trade it, cut it, get it out of here. The natural progression, no matter how hard you try, is going to be only a couple of win season, and then that naturally will put you in position for the quarterback. You can't do that year 2, year 3. You've got to do it year 1. There's loads of guys that won't be here when we need them. They're not the right guys, they're overpriced guys. You got to get it all out, and this roster is not that good, and if you do that, the roster will be so bad that you can't get yourself in position. And like Fitzpatrick, Greer thought, well, you know what? They're going to think we're going to tank. I'll bring in Fitzpatrick, make us look like we're not going to tank. But him and Flores were enough to get us out of the top pick to get the best quarterback. So his poor evaluation, his poor expectations cost long-term success. It's the same thing with Willis. If Willis is a very good quarterback, go get him, because that's the future. But if he's a decent quarterback and he puts you outside the range of the top quarterbacks or a top pick, and he's not serving you in the future, then you're going, honey, we can't afford the vacation this summer. Let me go get the credit card and go pay for that vacation. And it feels good now, but now you're cut off because you're paying interest and you can't do it in year 2 and year 3. We've got to cut it all out. Get this cap in check. Get guys out of here that aren't the right type of guys. And because the team is so poor, this will naturally lead, no matter how much Hafley coaches and his staff and the players that remain want, they won't have success. It's a league of horses. So I love that. I love Hafley talk about teaching in tough times. He wasn't too long. He was succinct. He talked about business, and that's what football is. He even mentioned Tyson. Everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face. In football, it's not about riding the high times. No matter who you are, even especially if you're on the way to Super Bowl, there will be a moment where the pit opens up. And it's at that point where the character pulls you out of the pit, the toughness pulls you out of the pit, and then propels you to that great moment. It's about surviving the tough times. And I felt like that was very serious on both of them. Accountability, he mentioned over and over. He talked about, look, I understand fans and people are going to be slow to trust. He says, but I'm going to earn it. But that's what we have to understand as fans. It's not about, oh, let's tank to get the first pick. But if they do it right, it's going to be an ugly season. People will lose trust if they don't understand the realities of building a team as a winner. And he said he'll turn it around, but it's going to take time. He talked about insecurities of staffs and players. I've talked about that for a long time too. It's a paranoid league. Someone's behind you ready to take your job. Staff, you're always worried about, am I going to lose it? It's a constant state of fluctuation, moving from team to team to team. But he understands that. And just the fact that he mentioned it is something very rare and is very good. Again, he talked about full spectrum toughness, doing it the right way. And a core thing is I went to school to be a teacher. I didn't end up doing it because I didn't like the system. And I figured it wasn't for me. But in my heart, that's what I try to do here. And it's not the same as what he was talking about, but he talked about changing lives. That's why he's in it. And that's the heart of a teacher. You're trying to connect with somebody to impart information so their lives are enhanced. And I love that. You need a teacher. You need a teacher at every level. He talked about his staff. They're going to have to teach. It's an imperative. And he talked about he made mistakes. He didn't avoid it. He didn't blame others like the Greer and the McDaniels and everybody else. He took ownership. He said, when I was with BC, I made mistakes. I've made mistakes through the course of my career, but I've learned from that alone. To admit it ties into the accountability, ties into being humble enough to be the leader. The leader has to have a certain level of toughness, but also humility. My man Sullivan talked, you can't have a culture if they aren't bought in. And born in, I would say too, when you get guys out of from rookies into your team, they're young kids. They're not veterans. And it's much harder to take somebody like that. I mean, it's much easier to take somebody like that and get them born in and bought into what you believe. Again, it ties into what they want to do here. He talked about hitting the middle and late rounds. I've said that over and over again. You want to build an offensive line, don't go grab 5 first-round picks. All the best teams, they find guys 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, and those guys, they'll definitely usually have a guy in the 1st round, 2nd round, but the best teams are the ones that find guys late. Offensive linemen, good players. You've got to hit those middle rounds, and it doesn't always have to be a star, but a guy that at least contributes, and I love that. Community of a consensus. Now, I love the enlightened monarch, the guy who runs the whole show, but he listens to everybody. I don't know if he's going to have final say. He talked about the Shoreman and the Garfunkel and all the other different voices, and he believed in listening and a community, which is really I did a podcast on it, how the NFL is kind of going in that direction. I don't know if he's going to have final say. You need one person with final say. I'm hoping it's him. So that was a little thing I was wondering. Most important and most dependent, perception of buddy. Oh yeah. So he talked about how a lot of people, even like that, when you say certain things that are genuine, he said there's a perception out there that Hafley came here because we're buddy. And he took care of that. And he talked about, yeah, look, I'm here to win. It's hard to get a job. Football and this team is more important to me than my resume. Unlike Greer, it's more important to me than our personal relationships. Like Greer and even Ross for a while. Hopefully that's changed. But he admitted, look, I liked Hafley. I kind of wanted him, but he talked about the process of going through and he even stepped out, he said, and let everybody else question Hafley on that last thing for 45 minutes, and they came to his evaluation. I enjoyed that. He talked about controlling the offensive line, big and tough, and Hafley mirrored it, and I'll get into that in a second. And he talked about infrastructure, and this is the thing, he talked about infrastructure. The number one thing, remember I've said build the team and then the QB will come. And he talked about before we find our guy, because the quarterback is the most important position, but the most dependent. I've said that over and over, and people want to say it's the quarterback. He does everything. No. You build the infrastructure. You maximize your quarterback to whatever it is. And he talked about shooting every year for the quarterback. He wanted the deepest quarterback group. He talked about going after guys and keep filling it out. He talked about what happened with Green Bay, with Brett and Aaron, and then Aaron and Love. And that is great news. The way of doing it is it's a piece of the puzzle, an important piece. It's a thing you can trade. You can never have too deep a class. That's great news. Doesn't mean every year he's going to use first round picks, and maybe one year he's not going to, but it's going to be something that they're doing, and that's as good as it gets. Now, I didn't know that Hafley was hired by Wannstedt. I thought that was interesting, and maybe there's a connection there because Wannstedt knows Jimmy. Jimmy is obviously involved with Troy, and Troy's involved with Ross. So there's a little bit of a connection there, of a personal understanding of who Hafley is. Also, Sullivan talked about hard work or get off the train. He talked about how this place is a great place to be, but if you don't have guys that want to do the hard work, this could be a place that can cause problems. We all know that. It's always kind of been danced around. And so again, this is about that accountability, about that buying in and born in thing, understanding the pits and the promise, the peril and the promise of being in Miami. And I thought that was great. Now, Hafley talked about calling plays. I was hoping he'd just be the head coach, but he says he's going to call plays. He's going to get a DC in there, obviously an OC, but he's going to call plays. I would have preferred him to be that guy, but that's his call. We'll see how it plays out. And he talked about how the little things get lost in football, and he talked about modern football. That's the problem. There's these little things, and if he can get his guys to do that, they're going to have an advantage around the league. That's called good coaching. And if you remember, the Patriots for years just let other teams beat them because they were more prepared. They got the little things down. I'm not saying he's Belichick, but that's a real deal. And it's great that he talked about it. He talked about he wants to run the ball well. He talked about as a defensive coordinator, and I've mentioned this for a long time, sitting in shotgun all day is retarded. It makes it so much easier for the reads. It makes so much easier for the preparation. He talked about being on the center. It all looks the same. And it was harder for him as a coach. And that's what he wants. He wants to run the football. He wants his guys to be on the center. And he talked about, if they know I'm going to run, I still want to be able to run anyway. So you've got simpatico with Sullivan and Hafley on running the football inside, being big and being tough. I'm sure it's going to be outside over there. He didn't really talk about the OC philosophy, but it's clear it's going to be that. They know, the game knows. I got a clip on Bean. We talked about that, how in 2020, we would run our RPOs, run outside, spread guys out. Then the defenses got small, and then it became out running the football inside. The cycle changed. I've been talking about it for a while. I got some grief by some people, but it's the reality. And these guys understand the cycle. That's great. In the end, we got to see how it plays out. But what more could you ask for? And even Sullivan talked about the experienced head coach. And he said, yeah, that was definitely a thing, but it's not. Guys, there's experienced head coaches that go all over the place and they flop. It's about getting the right guys. It's about both of them. They even both admitted, Sullivan and Hafley. Look, we're new at this. There's going to be a learning curve. But if you're smart and the right guy, you're going to learn from it, and hopefully early so you learn late. and then you have your success. It shouldn't take, like McDaniel, 4 years to get guys to the line of scrimmage, get guys disciplined, showing up to meetings and getting plays in on time and stuff like that. So if these guys are the right guys, we'll know very quickly, not by year 1, but by year 2, but they talked about it. They admitted it. And in the end, this team philosophically couldn't be in a better setting. The application is what we got to focus on, and that will be, told by the staff that comes in and what they actually do. But if you're a normal person and you look at somebody and you watch, say, a Chris Greer or a Mike McDaniel talk, and you watch these guys talk, if you had a choice between that GM and this GM and that coach and this coach, who would you buy a car from? Who would you want to hang out with? Who would you trust more? Who would you put in charge of a business? It's clear. They're normal. They've got the head on their shoulders. They're personable, like kind of regular dudes. Doesn't mean they're going to be great. But the difference between what we had and what we have is going to be very vast. And unfortunately, because of where we're at and what they did, it's a pit over there. And so the vast difference is just normal. And we got to see if that normal can go to greatness. Time will tell, but I don't know how you don't like these guys. I don't know how you can't be very appreciative to listen to conversations from people besides the stupid audio and say, I enjoy listening to these guys. I learned something. They're normal. And that's a great start for the Dolphins. We got to get to sanity and normal first before we get to greatness. Let's hope these are the guys that do it. Curtis saying, be well, go Fins. Curtis. Start building your own online sports book today by getting signed up with aceperhead.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.